I've completely burned myself out over the last week, so my mind's really starting to rev up at this point, which is very cool. I think it's a really unique experience to lose cognitive capacity and then regain it. The regaining is kind of unusual. And as it's been able to absorb more information again and retain it, I started tearing through books and a lot of books that I've already read. And the theory that I had is working great, that all those neural networks were still in place, but they had deteriorated because of the myelin coming unwrapped, basically entropy. Entropy applied to neural networks. And so I started firing them, they started coming back together, and it all started coming fast, really quick. So over the last week, maybe a little bit more than a week, I have read a lot. I can't exactly estimate it, but definitely over 1,000 pages of pretty deep philosophy, psychology, economics, history, a bunch of really interesting things, most of which I have encountered before. There's some new stuff. I found something new in a branch of what's usually called Austrian economics, or under the umbrella of praxeology, which is a study of human action from one specific directive. They really have developed catalactics, which is the study of the exchange of utility, so exchange of something useful, basically economics. And two guys from Austria, which is interesting because most people that are Austrian economists aren't in Austria anymore. That's just where it started. 2 years ago, two guys from Austria invented the term cradix to take up the opposite, exchanges of disutility. So essentially threats, beating people up, harming people, stuff like this, getting people to do things that way instead of offering an incentive. And it's amazing. But they literally came out with it in 2015, and they've come out with two major papers since then, and it's amazing. It's wonderful, wonderful work. So that's new, something very interesting. And I've been able to tie some things in that I learned slowly over these last 2 years with some of the old material I had, and it's just incredible. But I've been staying up late, and reading and consuming information like that is tiring. Right? Your brain uses a lot of energy. They estimate it's like 20-25% of your body's energy is used in your brain, which seems ridiculous. I haven't looked heavily into that, but I do believe it is definitely a lot. And especially when you're focusing on all that time, I'm guessing it rises quite a bit more. It's not just the average. And then if you stay up there, you hit an ironic situation because it's trying to stay up reading to learn all this stuff. But memory is when your brain condenses, compresses, and organizes a lot of information and allows you to keep that and retain that information over time. So if you stay up reading, it becomes slightly self-defeating, which is interesting, and then it deteriorates my health a little bit, so it naturally slows me down. So I'm completely burnt out at this point, but it's been super interesting. It's kind of been amazing, and I've got a ton of stuff in the works. I used to, before I wasn't able to do too much, I've keep lists and track of all the different stuff that I'm working on, different things that I'm studying, courses that I'm taking, books that I'm reading, things that I'm writing, projects I'm involved in, where I'm working at, and I keep track of all this stuff generally in forms. But fairly recently, over the last year, maybe more than a year at this point, I haven't really needed to because I haven't had that much going on. So this list is just like short. I can kind of just write the entire thing in the side of my written planner that I keep. But now it's really fleshing back out into what it used to be. So it's really interesting how much stuff I've taken on. We'll see if I can exactly handle it. And it's amazing the weird stuff that happens in that life is chaos theory, right? Like from math, like everything's completely determined, like the future is going to happen however it happens. There's nothing butting in to change anything in particular without causality. But you can't know what that is. It's completely incalculable. You have no idea how it's going to go. So two people came to one of our Toastmasters groups recently, and they're starting up or have started up and run a marketing company I believe they focus on video stuff, graphic design, things like that. But I know they definitely do videos because they're looking for people to do voiceover work. And they saw one of my speeches. They thought my voice might work for one of their clients. So I might end up doing voiceover work in the future. How weird is that? Super interesting. So something I never would have, I haven't pursued, I probably wouldn't have pursued, wouldn't even have really looked into. It's just interesting, all the crazy stuff that happens all over the place. So it's been a super interesting week and a half, however long it's been. Time kind of got weird in there. And now I'm backing off a little bit of it because I have so much stuff going that I have to stop taking new things on and resolve. I'm taking multiple courses and teaching little kids phonics. I'm taking a course in that. I'm taking a course in the philosophy of education. And I have a bunch of books and reading materials started in a bunch of different areas. My reading list is huge. It's over a page right now of things that I've started, and I've resolved and finished a bunch of things, but I want to resolve more off that list, so it's not quite so big, so I'm not trying to maintain the whole thing. So I'm going to work on whittling some things down that it's possible to complete. Some projects are obviously ongoing, so I'll keep moving forward with those, but super interesting. It's been fun. Now I have to shift gears a little bit because I was in more of a productive phase where I was writing more and doing more output, and then I went into it's weird to call it not productive, but more into a study phase essentially for the last week and a half, 2 weeks. It's been somewhere there. I'm going to call it a week and a half. So I went into this complete study phase where it was all just input instead of output. And now I have to switch from taking all this input and make it into something useful and make it back into output and do something with it. So that transition is a bit weird, but I'm making it happen right now. a little bit. I really enjoy and like the input. Right? If I naturally I just fall into having a ton of input and very little output because I have no time or energy or just resources in general left for the output. Whereas that's not useful in a lot of ways, and then it becomes a little bit self-defeating because you gain resources through output so that you can take more input, so you have to balance them a little bit. But the pendulum swung hard this time towards input, and it was fun. It was super interesting, and now I have to move towards more output again, so that'll be good. And I've been working on putting together speech on the meaning of pain, which kind of goes with the philosophy essays that I've been writing, but it's more concrete in the speech. I go through more examples and less exposition, essentially. I really like this interesting format that I take where if I'm going to give a speech, why I can come up with a speech so quickly is I try to come up with like a deep question, and then I dive right into a story pretty quickly, and then I make a point. And then if you're going to make a more complex speech or you're going to flesh it out into something a little bigger, you can adjust that structure a little bit if you come up with a deep question, and then you go through a story, make a point, transition into another story, and then make a point again. That's the one I'm going with for the meaning of pain right now. I've given it twice, and it was really good. I've gotten good reviews on it both times, and it can definitely still be improved. And I'm going to flesh that out until a little bit longer. It's just under 5 minutes right now, and I think I could even include one more point, and if I do it quickly, I could still get it under 7 minutes because I have a speech contest, series of speech contests starting in December. So coming right up, and I'm probably going to use it for that, either in the format that it's in or just lengthen it a little bit with one more bit, or keep the bits in it. I have 2 bits in it. I could keep those 2 bits and just lengthen them out a little bit. It'll have to be between 5 and 7 minutes. And then eventually I'll probably do some public speaking on it in just the general public, and then I'll lengthen it out to maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes, depending on how it goes. But the speaking is much more concrete. The stories are more useful, I have found. Maybe in my writing too. Maybe people would like my writing more if I use more concretes instead of so many abstractions. But that format works very good for several points. When you're communicating something, it's very useful to, well, you need motivation. You need motivation in the audience that you're communicating to, otherwise they'll just disengage. You need to limit the subject matter that you're going over. And the powerful question does both of those really well. If you start off a story with, is life worth living? Right, Albert Camus's question, and it's like, and you wait right there, you do this pause, and I was trained live in front of 130 people on how to pause after an initial question by Darren LaCroix, a former champion of world public speaking. That was really intense because I was bad at it. I would just ask the question and then jump right in the story. And we trained for, I don't know how long exactly in front of this crowd. I would ask my question and then wait until what I thought was a pause. So it would be like, ask the question, go. And then he would stop me and be like, wrong. And I'd do it again, wrong. Do it again, wrong. And I could never get through 2 sentences with this guy. This was my training. I was going to give the speech and then have him review it. And he just stopped me right away. And so he was standing behind me. This is how we ended up resolving it because I wasn't improving. So he ended up standing behind me, and I asked my question into the microphone at the audience, and then I just had to stand there, and he whispered into my ear his internal dialogue in response to the question for an oddly long period of time. I was very uncomfortable, and then after he got done going through his internal dialogue, I could go on with my next sentence. And it was some really intense training. It was really cool. I learned a lot in that pretty short period of time. And that beginning question does so much because it helps to motivate the audience, who hopefully are already motivated with your intro or something they've heard before about you, or in some way. The more motivation, the better. And then it really limits your subject down to this question that you're going over, but it's in a very abstract term. And now the other 2 main points of communicating are having an organized structure, which I always do with points and stories in some way, points and stories. That helps with the structure, and then I try to keep it chronological, and that helps a lot. And reiterate things throughout. For my points in this speech are slightly different, but almost the same. They even use some of the same words in the same word format. So you're reiterating like that. Adds a nice structure. Very logical, easy to retain. And then it's about balancing concretes and abstractions. And in my philosophical writing, I use more abstractions but less concretes, which I've done it differently because I've tried to use almost all stories and include the points in there. But recently, I've been doing more abstractions and some concretes, but not as much. But in the speaking, I'm really heavy on the concretes and light on the abstractions. So that it's an interesting balance to write something and then speak about something and see the difference that I make to try to adjust for the audience. But it doesn't make me question my writing. I know it works in front of an audience when I'm speaking because you do it and you can tell right now if people are looking at you, if they're not looking at you. You can tell if people are emotionally driven or they're confused about something. You can tell immediately. Whereas when you're writing, it's kind of hard to tell. You can get feedback from some people. I talk to some people I know that read my articles, but it's always delayed and they've always processed it more. So it's hard to get that immediate feedback. But it's a different medium, so I don't think it would be the same as speaking either. And it's something I've been dealing with, struggling with, trying to problem solve the differences between nonfiction writing versus nonfiction speaking. It's an interesting problem, I think. Interesting problem. They kind of complement each other, but they're a bit different. And so hopefully I'll be doing a lot more of this output, doing more. I've done some, of course, over the last week and a half, but doing more of the speaking. I need to do a deep dive back into writing again. I've still been teaching some, my normal amounts. That's how I make my money. And then get some of these things checked off the list. I have one major seminar to give for my Advanced Communicator Gold Award for Toastmasters, and I've instituted some things in the Montague Club that they're vice president of education, so I'm really setting up the programs. They're a new chartering club, and I am diving in. I'm just still working through some stuff to work on my IQ. I'm going through some math problems again because I haven't done math in a long time. Not advanced math. You always do some simple math, but I haven't done more advanced math in a long time. So I'm kind of working on that, and I assume that'll help with my IQ scores again because I'm right about at the mark for the Mensa, which is the best known high IQ society, at 2%, and I believe the test, I never really paid attention that much, but I believe the test, I was testing above that before, so I want to try to nudge that up a little bit, so I'm sure that when I take the test, I'll pass. You can't be completely sure, but you can be pretty sure, so I want to be a little more sure. And we will see how that goes. It's been an interesting week. The next one will be interesting too. All weeks are basically interesting, but it's been a unique week in life of regaining cognitive capacity really fast and memory really fast. It's stuff that took me years to learn, that then took me weeks and months to forget, then I learned again in days. And it's really odd experience, almost like a religious awakening experience. You just have a flood of information coming in, kind of like drinking from a fire hose, but instead of missing all the water is going in, and you're just filling up really fast. So it's been kind of a cool experience and a bit overwhelming. And so I'll be happy to transition to doing something a little differently.